I'm the National Register Coordinator. We were having a little bit of technical difficulties, but I'm going to go ahead and get started on our National Register of Historic Places overview. All right, so starting out, so who can nominate a property to the National Register? So, except under special circumstances, the SHPO is the only person with the authority to nominate properties to the National Register. If a tribal government has assumed SHPO duties on the tribal land under Section 101 of the National Historic Preservation Act, then the Tribal Preservation Officer, the THPO, becomes a nominating authority. A federal agency can nominate property in its ownership to the National Register. So essentially, the THPO is the tribal official appointed by the tribe's chief governing authority or designated by a tribal ordinance or preservation program who has assumed all or any part of the responsibilities of the SHPO. Tribes can submit an application to the National Park Service that identifies the NHPA programs for which they elect to assume responsibility and detail how they will meet the requirements for doing so. The National Register is among the programs for which they can elect to assume responsibility. Typically, how our office works is once our HPRC committee has approved a nomination, we forward it on to that THPO, that governing THPO, depending on what reservation it's on. They will then review it, get it back to us, and then we move it over to the National Park Service. So who can prepare a property to the National Register of Historic Places? Anyone can prepare a National Register nomination for any property and submit the nomination package to the SHPO, even these two guys. So SHPO reviews and processes all nominations received in accordance with National Park regulations and the relevant standards and guidelines. SHPO encourages individuals preparing National Register nominations to involve property owners in the project and to work with the SHPO to provide accurate information to property owners about the National Register process and their rights in that process. So can an owner object to the listing of their property in the National Register? Absolutely. Property owners have the right to object to the listing if a simple majority of private owners provide a statement to SHPO that they are the sole or partial owner of a property and that they object to its listing in the National Register. It will not be listed. When a majority of property owners file such objections with SHPO through regular mail or in person, the deadline specified in the notice to property owners, SHPO will complete the formal review of the nomination under National Park Service regulations. However, the keeper will just issue a determination of eligibility rather than formally list the property. So frequently asked questions. The National Register of Historic Places does not prevent demolition of a property. It does not restrict the use of the property. It does not restrict the sale of private property. It doesn't require any specific guidelines be followed. It does not guarantee funds for restoration. It does not provide a tax credit for a private residential structure. It doesn't provide a historic marker for the property. And in addition to demolition, National Register listings do not require continued maintenance of private property or guarantee perpetual maintenance of the property. So it basically does not require an owner to give tours of the property or open the property to the public. It's still your private property to do with as you please. What does the National Register do then? So it does provide recognition of the property's significance. It does provide limited protection when it's endangered by federal undertakings, which goes through our Section 106. It does provide owners of income-producing property the opportunity to receive investment credits for certified rehabilitation. And it does provide the owner an opportunity to apply for matching grant in aid when such funding is available, which typically is not. Matching grants from our office are currently not available, probably won't be in the available near future. Grant programs are available through the National Trust for Historic Preservation and the National Park Service. There are various grant and loan programs available through other local, state, or federal entities. You can reach out to our office for information on these programs. You can also find some online, just a simple Google search. There are companies like T-Mobile, American Express, who do offer some sort of grants for historic rehabilitation. So what can be listed in the National Register? The National Register is basically a catalog of the buildings, structures, sites, objects, and districts that are significant in American history, architecture, archaeology, engineering, or culture. This is a shot of Heritage Hills. Buildings can be registered. They're designed to house people and their activities. For example, as you can see here, the First National Bank and Trust Company building. Buildings are any range of activities. They can be residential, government, military preparedness, commercial. First National here is listed for both its commercial and its architectural significance. Buildings can be of vernacular design, but also have historic importance. So on the right here, Czech Hall of Oklahoma City was built in 1924, listed for its significance to social history, specifically for its association with a Czech fraternal organization that provided social and humanitarian support to Czech immigrants in Oklahoma City. On the left, we have Vernon AME Church in Tulsa. This was a reconstructed church in Greenwood associated with the Tulsa Race Massacre, the Reconstruction period, and the social history. Buildings can also represent distinctive designs. On the left, we have the Prairie House, built in 1961. It is listed for its organic architectural style. It's designed by Herb Green. On the right, we have Citizens State Bank with the Citizens Bank Tower in the background. Built in 1958, also known as the Gold Dome in Oklahoma City. It's significant for its distinctive modern style, specifically its gold geodesic dome roof. It's among the most distinct mid-century buildings in Oklahoma City. Citizens Bank Tower is architecturally significant in its own right as well. It's among the first tall office buildings constructed outside of downtown Oklahoma City and is a Frank Lloyd Wright inspired design. Buildings don't always have to be the pretty mansions. Langston's early jail was recently listed at the local level under Criterion A for its association with law, and Criterion C in the area of architecture as a one-room jail. I often mention this when discussing the National Register. Arkansas has a phone booth listed. While it's unconventional, it shows that the National Register is constantly evolving, changing, and adapting. This phone booth still works. It collects about $4 a year in revenue for the town of Prairie Grove. It is listed under Criterion A for its importance in the history of communication. Structures. These are designed for purposes other than containing people. For example, the Bridgeport Bridge in Caddo County along Route 66, its significance for its association with Route 66 and for its design construction. It is a series of 38 identical camelback pony truss spans. Structures are often engineering resources. For example, the Lake Overholser Dam here in Oklahoma City. It can be dams, roadbeds, and bridges. Those are all considered structures. Structures may also be purely functional. These are the terminal elevators in Enid in Garfield County. I know them well. I grew up about 5 seconds from them, and I got to listen to the trains come in and day out. Sites. So sites can be listed. These are the location of activities important in history. This is Rock Mary in Caddo County. It's a natural tower of red sandstone that served as a navigational landmark for overland travelers through western Oklahoma. As recorded in travel diaries and other documents, if you come across the book that's out of print, Marcy and the Gold Seekers, you might snag it up. There's a brief history in it about Rock Mary, how it got its name, some really good information on early travel routes and maps across Oklahoma and Indian territories. In Oklahoma City, there is the Oklahoma City Discovery Well site, which is near Southeast 57th and South Bryant. That was listed in 1977. Sites can also possess archaeological value. The Chisholm Spring Spring House is a recent listing. It's listed under Criterion A for exploration settlement, and also Criterion D for its archaeological information and its potential to yield information regarding spring house construction. We have a couple of prehistoric bison kill sites that are listed in the National Register. We have the Cooper Bison Kill Site in Harper County and Harrell Bison Kill Site in Ellis County. Within Oklahoma City, there is the Spencer No. 2 archaeological site. Sites can also be of historic or cultural value. This is a Silver City Cemetery in Grady County. This is the last tangible resource associated with the Silver City community. In Oklahoma City, the Fairlawn Cemetery is listed in the National Register as a contributing resource to the Paseo Neighborhood District. Objects can also be listed in the National Register. These are primarily small in scale. They're often artistic, but they're not necessarily static. On the left, you have the Pioneer Woman statue in Ponca City. And then on the right, you have the Spirit of the American Doughboy statue in Muskogee County. They may also be individually listed, but they're more likely to contribute to the character of a district. So these are signs located in Robbers Cave State Park Historic District, Latimer County, constructed by the CCC. So they are considered a contributing resource to that historic district. So districts can be contiguous areas made up of multiple buildings, sites, structures, and objects that are related. They're oftentimes residential or commercial. On the top left here, on the bottom right, we have the Jefferson Park Historic District in Oklahoma City, and then on the top left is the Villa Teresa Historic District. Villa Teresa is significant not only for the grand residential buildings, but for their ultimate association with Villa Teresa School. Discontiguous districts may also be listed on the National Register. They can also be agricultural or design landscapes. So, for example, here are the Will Rogers Park Gardens and Arboretum Historic District. It's significant for landscape design and for association with the city park systems and their plans. They can also be any combination of resources united historically or aesthetically by plan or physical development. For example, the Sidney and Mary Lyons Residence and Commercial Historic District here in Oklahoma City. There are 3 different levels of significance that a National Register nomination can fall under. You have the national level of significance, which demonstrates a significance within a national context. You have state level, which are properties that are significant at a statewide level. They're evaluated within that statewide context. And then you have the local level of significance. These are evaluated within the context of the local community. Most listed properties are significant at the local level. You only need to meet one level of significance. So although there are instances where more than one level of significance could apply, but you really only need to meet one. So an example, national level of significance. It demonstrates significance within a national context. This is the Bizzle Memorial Library in Cleveland County. A nationwide comparison has to be made. So in this case, a nationwide assessment of higher education property significant to African American civil rights. Bizzle Libraries Historic Association is with Ada Louise Sopel Fisher and the process of desegregation at OU's campus. This must be a scholarly written, i.e. significant research with primary sources, footnotes, bibliography, etc. If you think context development, if you cannot develop a complete national context for the resource type, do not attempt trying a national significance. All National Historic Landmarks are nationally significant. Guthrie National Historic Landmark District was designated in 1999. It is a National Historic Landmark standard. Places that possess exceptional value or quality in illustrating and interpreting the heritage of the United States are designated National Historic Landmarks. Guthrie received NHL status for its role in the settlement of Oklahoma and for its collection of pre-statehood and early statehood commercial, residential, and cultural architecture. There are fewer than 2,500 National Historic Landmarks. Currently, 22 of those are in Oklahoma. Honey Springs Battlefield in Northwest is the newest Oklahoma national listing, listed in 2013. It is located in Muskogee County near Rentisville. Honey Springs was the largest Civil War engagement in Indian Territory. For the state level of significance, properties that are significant at a statewide level, a good example are the state capitol complex resources. This includes the Oklahoma State Capitol, listed pre-dome for statewide significance, the Oklahoma Historical Society building, which is down on the lower right-hand corner. It also includes the Oklahoma National Guard Armory and the State Highway Department Testing Laboratory. Those are out of the frame of this picture, but they would be off to the left. Statewide are generally viewed within a statewide context. So other significant statewide examples are Old Central in Stillwater. They're on the right. It's the first permanent building on the campus of Oklahoma State University, formerly Oklahoma A&M. On the left, the Lawton National Guard Armory. It's listed at the statewide level for its association with the Oklahoma National Guard during the Cold War. Properties associated with a statewide organization or group will more than likely need to be evaluated at a statewide context. The same goes for resources that cross the state or perhaps pertain to statewide territorial transportation or commerce. The McGranahan portion of the Chisholm Trail in Canadian County is significant for its association with the Chisholm Trail. When we get to the local level of significance, most properties are listed at this level. For example, here the Main Street Arcade in Oklahoma City, built in 1923, listed for its local educational significance, specifically for its association with Hills Business College, which operated at this location from 1923 to 1968. Local is also evaluated within the context of the local community. This is Fraser Cemetery in the Altus vicinity in Jackson County, significant for its association with early settlement in Greer County, which is now Jackson County. The town was abandoned in 1891, with most residents establishing a town to the east called Altus. They also reflect trends or events that impact history at the local level. For example, Calvary Baptist Church, listed in 1978, is significant for its importance as a social and cultural center in Oklahoma City's African American community. It's also prominent for its role in the sit-in movements of the late 1950s and early 1960s. So there are 4 criteria for evaluation. While a resource can be determined eligible under multiple criteria, you only have to prove or make the argument for one for a National Register nomination. Criterion A are properties that are associated with events that have made a significant contribution to the broad patterns of our history. So this is a specific event marking an important moment in American prehistory or history. It can be a pattern of events or a historic trend that made a significant contribution to the development of community, state, or nation. Criterion A can be a singular event, happens at a specific place at a specific time. For example, the Ouachita Battlefield in Roger Mills County, which is now the Ouachita Battlefield National Historic Site. The site protects and interprets a setting along the Ouachita River where Lieutenant Colonel George A. Custer led the 7th U.S. Cavalry on a surprise dawn attack against the Southern Cheyenne village of Peace Chief Black Kettle on November 27, 1868. Criterion A can be a continuum of events. Commerce is an event, so is community planning and development. Capitol Hill Commercial District in Oklahoma City is listed at the local level under Criterion A for both areas. Commercial development of Capitol Hill occurred along Southwest 25th Street. The buildings reflect the commercial growth of a distinct community within Oklahoma City during the early to mid-20th century. Criterion A can involve education and ethnic heritage. This is the Lincoln Colored School in Fairfax, Osage County, So the photo on the left was taken when the property was listed in 2003. The photo on the right was submitted recently as part of a Section 106 review process. The property is listed under Criterion A for education and for ethnic heritage black for its role as a separate school open only to African American children during the era of Jim Crow segregation. Criterion B, properties associated with the lives of persons significant in our past. You need to compare this property against all others associated with the specific person's productive life. Does it best represent the time period when he or she achieved significance? In other words, was that person living in or at the designated building or area during their period of significance, what they are historically known for? The person must be significant and there must be a direct tie to the property. This is the Frank and Jane Phillips home in Bartlesville. Another example, Kane's Ballroom. The association between the property and the person must be direct and during the time when they achieve significance. Kane's Ballroom was designated for its association with Bob Wills. I think it should have been Sid Vicious, but that's my opinion. Criterion C, properties that embody the distinctive characteristics of a type, period, or method of construction, or that represent the work of a master, or that possess high artistic values, or that represent a significant and distinguishable entity whose components lack individual distinction. Criterion C is for architecturally significant resources. Criterion C is used for distinctive characteristics of a type. The old Santa Fe Railroad Bridge in Winnett vicinity. This is a camelback through truss. It can refer to the form, function, or use of a property. Criterion C can represent a specific architectural style or characteristics of a certain period. Here we have the W.T. Hales House in Oklahoma City. This is the classical revival style. It has fluted two-story columns that support the entrance portico. It was the largest residence in Oklahoma City at the time of its construction in 1916. Criterion C is used for examples of characteristics of construction methods, such as the Beard Cabin in Shawnee. It was the first house built in Shawnee of log construction and square notches. The Schultz-Neal Stone Barn in Noble County is the largest freestanding stone barn in the state. Criterion C can also be designated for more modern technologies or materials used in construction. The Usher House in Cushing, it's made by the Lustron Corporation, is a metal prefabricated house designed to help alleviate the housing crisis following World War II. Criterion C is also used for describing the works of a master architect. On the left, the Joyce House in Snyder, Kiowa County. Again, the works of a notable architect, Herb Green. On the right is the Price Tower in Bartlesville, Washington County, a skyscraper designed by Frank Lloyd Wright. Criterion C can also describe something of artistic value, such as Ed Galloway's Totem Pole Park in Rogers County. Galloway was among Oklahoma's premier folk artists. The stained glass windows within the Whitechapel of Song at the University of Central Oklahoma is on the right. Students carved the pews, glazed and fired the ceramic tiles on the walls. They designed and crafted the 15 stained glass windows. The architects, Dwayne Connor and Fred Pogizzi, I hope I said that right, designed the building based on the windows. Another point of reference would be the New Deal era post office that feature murals created by artists through the WPA program. Historic districts may also fall under Criterion C. Automobile Alley Historic District, for example. It's a distinctive entity whose components just do not lack individual distinction. Districts are considered a single entity, i.e. property. Resources within the district are generally not individually eligible. This is Edward Heights Historic District in Northeast Oklahoma City. Developed by Walter and Francis Edwards, the majority of properties were constructed between 1946 and 1955. Most properties are small and designed in minimal traditional or minimal ranch styles with stone or brick exteriors. Houses generally would not have been individually eligible. This house is a contributing resource to the White City Historic District in Tulsa. The district is noted for its architecture, specifically the collection of Tudor Revival and minimal traditional styles constructed in two distinct phases between 1926-1930 and 1941-1950. This house is a non-contributing resource to the White City Historic District in Tulsa. So general rule for a district nomination, the majority of resources, more than 50%, should be determined contributing. A resource is typically considered non-contributing if there are alterations and or a lack of association with the district's significance. And then finally, criterion D. These are properties that have yielded or may be likely to yield information important to prehistory or history. Criterion D typically refers to archaeology that best describes the property type. So this can be prehistoric, historic Aboriginal, historic non-Aboriginal. Criterion D can provide any categories or subcategories about which the site has provided or is likely to provide information, for example, agriculture or engineering. So information potential, this typically refers to archaeological sites. This is the Tall Cane site in Sequoyah County. Criterion D could also refer to sites such as cemeteries. Archaeological sites may be prehistoric or historic. On the left is the Cooper site in Harper County. It's a bison kill site associated with Folsom Complex hunters between 10,000 and 11,000 BC, listed for the information it yielded on the hunting activities of indigenous peoples. Artifacts uncovered included arrow points and a painted bison skull. On the right is the Rose Hill Plantation in Choctaw County. It is listed under Criterion B as well for its association with Robert N. Jones, who was at one time the wealthiest member of the Choctaw Nation prior to the Civil War. Also listed under Criterion D for the archaeological information it has yielded. Buildings can also tell us information not readily available through other sources. The Vanderson Homestead in Beckham County is listed under Criterion A for its association with exploration settlement as one of the few remaining early settlement homesteads in western Oklahoma. It's also significant under Criterion D for its potential to yield information about half-dugout construction during the early settlement of Oklahoma. The dugout was actually built in several phases between 1896 and 1916. So some key takeaways: a property must be shown to be significant for one or more of the four criteria for evaluation. Historic context is the basis for judging a property's significance. Avoid describing the entire history of the property or the community. Just focus on the events, activities, or characteristics that make the property significant. The Claude Collier Chevrolet and Buick Company in Atoka is locally significant under Criterion C as a post-World War II auto showroom and dealership. Its historical context is the evolution of the showroom dealership property type. Its historical focus, it discussed the specific physical characteristics that made the property significant for its location and design. It's also large showroom windows. It has a large visible service department, exterior associated with the car lot. So it basically still retains its historical integrity. It looks the way it was meant to when it was first opened. Criteria considerations. There are some properties that are normally excluded from National Register of Historic Places, but under certain circumstances called criteria consideration, these properties in these categories can be listed. So criteria consideration A, if it's owned by a religious institution or used for religious purposes. This derives primary significance from architecture, artistic distinction, or historical importance, such as the First Unitarian Church of Oklahoma City. Churches can be listed for other criteria. First Unitarian listed under Criterion C as an excellent example of a religious building designed in the Colonial Revival architectural style. Consideration B, if a property has been removed from its original location. It's significant primarily for architectural value, or which is the surviving structure most importantly associated with the historic person or event. Moved properties can be listed if much of the historic integrity of the resource is maintained. This is the Verdon Separate School in Grady County. It is the sole remaining of a Grady County separate school. Originally situated on a farm, the building was moved to a pastoral location in Chickasha to prevent its destruction. Great care was taken in selecting the site in order to retain as much as possible the original rural setting of the school and its historical context. Criteria consideration C, a birthplace or a grave of a historical figure of outstanding importance. No other appropriate site or building directly associated with their productive life is still available. For example, this is the Jesse Chisholm gravesite in Blaine County. Birthplaces or graves can be listed if there is no other resource to associate with that person or community. Criteria consideration D, cemeteries. This derives primary significance from graves of persons of transcendent importance, from age, from distinctive design features, or from association with historic events. This is the Silver City Cemetery in Grady County. Cemeteries can be listed for design, age, or importance of the persons interred. In the case of Silver City, its association with exploration and settlement. Consideration E is a reconstructed building, object, or structure. It must be accurately executed in a suitable environment and presented as part of a restoration master plan when no other building or structure with the same association has survived. Reconstructed buildings, objects, structures can be listed if part of a sensitive master plan. So this means that the reconstructed property must be an essential component in a historic district and part of the overall restoration plan for a district. The reconstructed property must be located in the same site as the original and situated in the original grouping of buildings, structures, and objects. Main takeaway, this criteria consideration does not apply to individual resources outside of a historic district that have been reconstructed. Consideration F is a commemorative property. The Oklahoma City National Memorial, associated with the April 19, 1995 bombing of the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City. Criteria consideration F applied because the memorial is a commemorative property. The argument being that the symbolic value that the memorial has attained since the bombing has invested it with its own historical significance. Consideration G, a building or property less than 50 years of age. United Founders Life Tower in Oklahoma City was listed in 2013. Its period of significance of 1962-64 was just less than 50 years of age at the time of listing, hence the application of criteria consideration G. It's of exceptional importance for its significance under criterion C, architecture. It's the first modern skyscraper of distinction in the state of Oklahoma since construction of Price Tower in 1955, one of only 2 circular skyscrapers in the state. It also helped catalyze the development of this sector of northwest Oklahoma City and inspired the construction of other high-rise buildings in the vicinity. So components of historic districts do not have to meet criteria considerations unless they make up the majority of the district or are the focal point of the district. The Holy City of the Wichita's Historic District in Comanche County is an example of a historic district where criteria consideration A applied because the site is used for religious purposes. St. Anne's Home for the Aged, Oklahoma City, applied 2 of the most common criteria considerations, A and G. It is significant under criterion A for social history at the local level for its role in providing senior housing in Oklahoma City following World War II. Criteria consideration A applies because the property was run by a religious organization. Criterion G applies because the property continued to attain significance until 1980. The period of significance extended until that time because in 1980, the state of Oklahoma passed new legislation pertaining to nursing homes that ultimately led to the closure of this facility. So how does the nomination process work? Reviews typically occur between 30 and 45 days. Notification of property owners of consideration of nomination at review meetings. This would be either CLG or Historic Preservation Review Committees. Must occur at least 30 days before the meeting. Consultation with TIPOs. Tribal officials should have the opportunity to comment on a National Register nomination, even if their office has not elected to assume National Register responsibilities. If TIPO has assumed National Register responsibilities for properties on tribal land, the TIPO is responsible for processing the nomination. The Historic Preservation Review Committee meets on the third Thursday of January, April, July, and October, unless otherwise announced. Nominations forwarded to committee members 30 to 45 days in advance of the Historic Preservation Review Committee. After the review committee, nominations typically go through one last round of technical edits to account for comments from the committee. If a committee's comments on a nomination are more substantive, the nomination may be returned to the preparer for revisions. All written comments received before or during the committee meeting will be transmitted with the nomination to the keeper of the register. Upon receipt, the keeper can do the following. They can list the property in the National Register. They can issue a determination of eligibility. They can reject the property, or they can return the nomination for additional information or clarification. The SHPO shall also inform the owner and nomination preparer, if not the owner, when a property is rejected for listing or returned for additional information. We will also notify the local historic preservation officer if the property is within a CLG, certified local government. So something to keep in mind while completing or even when contemplating a National Register nomination or just in assessing your own property is that the National Park Service, beginning in 2022, began issuing their best practices review publications that complement the guidance provided in the National Register bulletins and provide examples on specific topics. These are very helpful as they provide updates on subjects such as, is vinyl siding considered historical, clarification on things like what constitutes community planning and development. The next scheduled best practices review will focus on the subject of parking lots as a contributing resource to historical sites and or commercial buildings. I should have shared the link for these in the handout section for you if you want to follow those links. And on that, I will also add, here's a link for any helpful information that you might need from our website.